Stress is a normal part of life, right? We experience it every day, and it's in itself not actually a bad thing because it helps us to pay attention, to focus, to even mobilize some additional resources stored up in our body so we can pay attention to what's necessary in the moment. The only time stress becomes an issue is when we get stuck in one of the stress responses or when we have chronic stress, which has been shown to be devastating for our body and actually makes us sick, right? And these responses happen once we get triggered into a stress state, right? And this is part of our brain in the limbic system called the amygdala. And the amygdala's job is to constantly look for potential danger, right? And so even perceived danger, even if there's no real danger, will already offset the amygdala, or even things like uncertainty and ambiguity, of which we have a lot of at the moment. And if we focus on this ambiguity, if we focus on how much uncertainty we're experiencing, it also gets us really stressed, right? But of course, it's also then the real things like actual physical pain, or even like, for example, discomfort. If you have digestive discomfort, even that can trigger the amygdala, right? And then there's things like, other people's emotions, right? When you're walking around in a city or in an office, you're picking up other people's emotions as well. And even if you're feeling great, they might be angry, and even that can trigger us as well, right? Or simple things like symmetry. Right? For example, in nature, if you think about it, nature, the only things that are symmetrical are things that are potentially things we should be paying attention to. Like an apple is round, right? Mirror symmetrical, or a saber-toothed tiger's head is round. We should really pay attention to that and run away, right? Or of course, a potential enemy or mate that we might want to pay attention to as well. And so even symmetry triggers our amygdala. And this is why it's so relaxing when you're suddenly in nature and you suddenly feel like, oh, I feel so cool. I don't even know why I feel so relaxed compared to being in a city environment where we don't just have other people around us all the time that are potential threats and danger, but we also have even like simple things like symmetry. And when the amygdala gets triggered, there's essentially about 1,400 different chemicals that get released into your system, among them primarily things like adrenaline and cortisol, which give you that stress response. And it triggers 4 different states of stress. And the very first one, the oldest one that we have in common with reptilians, is freeze, right? Just don't move. Hope the enemy will not see you. Right? And this is even like, some animals have developed camouflage, and even can change how they look, right? Hoping that if they don't move, if they just freeze, nothing will happen to them. Right? In the modern day, we find that through procrastination. Right? When you look at that email in your inbox that keeps being there and you keep not answering it and you keep looking at it and it keeps going up and down in your little inbox list, right? And that's procrastination. And oftentimes we give ourselves crap for being procrastinators, right? Because we're lazy or we don't, take initiative. But procrastination is actually a stress response. It's a freeze response. And the best thing to get over the freeze response is to move, right? To actually do something, right? Literally like get out of your seat, dance around the room, or do this one tiniest little thing you can do to begin to get movement going. For example, to hit reply to the email and start writing a draft, right? And maybe remove the receiver so that you don't accidentally send it when it's not ready. But do one little thing. What's the tiniest thing you can do to create movement? Now the problem is once I create movement, one of the second stress response comes in, and that's flight. Right? I'm like, oh, cool, I can move, or I can, they saw me, I can run, let's go run away. Right? And so you try and run away. And in modern day, we do that for all kinds of distraction. Right? We might go doom scroll, or we might get drunk, or we might, go shopping, or we might go look for a new job, or, go surf the internet. We might do something else to distract ourselves from the issue altogether, right? Because we don't want to feel bad. Right? And so we're trying to distract ourselves from it. Now, here, the strategy is very simple, which is dig in, right? Sometimes we don't feel good, and it's okay. We don't have to be happy, happy, happy all the time. But there's something important in emotions that teach us something as well. Right? And by sitting with the emotion, by allowing to be okay with not running away, by hanging in there and exploring the emotion, we can get all kinds of wisdom from that. Now, the thing is, when we feel bad, we tend to go into the third response, which is fight, right? Because it has to be someone's fault that we're feeling bad, right? In modern day, we don't necessarily do this anymore as much. There's still people who are doing this, unfortunately. But for the most part, fighting happens through blaming, right? Finger pointing. Oh, it's their fault because these people made me do this thing. And if it wasn't for the system, or if it wasn't for this client, or if it wasn't for this thing, I would be okay. Right? Or, of course, internally directed, depending on your predispositions to say, oh, I'm so horrible. I suck at this. I'm always doing this wrong. And you kind of blame yourself. Right? So there's a fight response in the modern day. And the best thing to do here is to come back into ownership, right? Because nobody can make you do anything. But in the end, having that internal locus of control, that's the only control we have. Right? Just like Viktor Frankl said, in that space between stimulus and response, that's where we grow, that's where freedom lies, if we take that space. So to come back into ownership in that moment, to remember this is your life. And then there's a fourth response, which is fawning, or fawn. And it's also sometimes called feigned, because it literally means like, good, I give up. Do with me whatever you want to. I hope this is over soon. Right? And as I said, it can be all the way to fainting, which can happen, especially under physical threat or physical violence, that you might faint because you're just like, hey, just gonna give in here and hope this is over soon. Right? Or it's like, oh, if you're in a relationship, you might have had that experience of, honey, just tell me what to say and what to do, and I'll do whatever, just make this be over. Right? And you're just trying to get beyond the situation. And here, the best thing is to remember what your identity is, right? Who do you want to be here? Right? Do you want to cower to someone else or a situation? Right? Do you want to be a victim of a situation? Or are you choosing to be in ownership and from there choosing who you want to be now? Right? So we have freeze, flight, fight, fawn, and we have movement to get or freezing. We have allowing the negative emotions and actually digging into them as a tool to deal with the flight response. Fight, right? Blaming, to take ownership again and come back to your center. And instead of fawning, to really think about, who do I want to be here? Right? And those are some basic strategies you can use when you're in a stress state, because we all go through them. Like if something stressful happened to you right now, you would go through all four situations, right? And we all have predispositions or things where we typically get stuck. Like for me, for example, it's flight or fawn, much more than freeze or fight. Other people are blaming people. Like we see that a lot in chat rooms sometimes, or online with comments where people throw mud at each other all day long. Right? That's a lot of times they respond to that. But think about what's your typical stress response where you might get stuck. Right? Because what happens afterwards, if you do go through all four, then there's a room for emergence, right? For something new to come in. Right? But it's important that we actually recognize when we're stuck in one of those situations or one of those conditions and get out of it as quickly as possible so we can move on to the next ones and ultimately be available again to see, who do I want to be in this situation right now? And then there's things, you can do like deep breathing, just to regulate your emotional stress. It's one of the easiest ways is breath to control your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, because if you have deep breaths, especially long exhales, that will activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part that tells your body everything is okay. You can distribute the blood more evenly, not just put it in my arms and legs for fighting and running, fighting, and you come back to a center point. So understanding the four responses, understanding which you are in, and also understanding what that looks like in others is super important, right? Because if I'm working as a leader, in particular with other people, to understand, hey, what's happening for them right now? If I haven't heard from them, maybe they're in a freeze state, right? Or if they're, they might be, escaping right now, right? Or if they find somebody in the team blaming people and gossiping, I can come back to, okay, how are you in ownership of the situation right now? And who do you want to be? Right? What's the identity that you want to have here? So recognizing these responses in ourselves and in others allows us to then mitigate them much more quickly and get into a state of emergence so we can be the creative leaders we came here to be.